Resident Evil 3, otherwise known as RE2 the RE3 DLC, otherwise known as this is totally a standalone video game worth every penny of your $60 US. Buy me! What you just heard right there was the thesis of my Resident Evil 3 critique, so if you're in a rush, you might as well just turn the video off right now. But of course, Resident Evil 3 is a much bigger fish that deserves a much bigger fry. Why was Resident Evil 3 so polarizing to a fan base hot off the heels of the classic Resident Evil 2 remake? Was the game really so short, bland, and poorly structured? Was the game really so disappointing? When Capcom's original Resident Evil 3 was released in 1999, there was an eerily similar critical reception. Comparisons to its classic predecessor Resident Evil 2 Remake were unavoidable. And within its gargantuan shadow, Nemesis's enormous feet could never be big enough to fill in its shoes. The horror and palpable tension of Leon and Claire's adventures were all but diminished with Jill's continued outing in the franchise, replaced instead with a focus on action that had shown increased returns for Resident Evil in the past.
Fuck you.
In reality, just as this approach had failed to increase sales in 1999, the 2020 Resident Evil 3 remake had failed to eclipse Resident Evil 2. However, sales numbers are no indication of quality. If they were, Resident Evil 5 would be the greatest game in the series, and Resident Evil 6 would be a close second.
No, wait, please!
Resident Evil 3's audience waited with both bated breath and healthy skepticism for its release. After all, Resident Evil 2, while majorly anticipated, was a gamble as far as living up to the 1998 classic. With Capcom having solidified their adept approach with remakes, the world sat more confidently that Resident Evil 3 would turn out just as well. The short year-long wait be damned.
I never dreamed that you would feel the way I do. I thought that I would know just what to say. But suddenly my voice...
Resident Evil's most stalwart fans found that their passions led them in various directions of opinion. Some believed the Resident Evil 3 remake was a fruitful, if not entirely faithful, adaptation worthy of being the Resident Evil 2 remake's follow-up. Others saw the 2020 release as a short in length, shallow, and quality cash grab that made the 1999 original look like a Shakespearean tour de force. As for casual fans, yeah, it was good. While being an impassioned Resident Evil stan myself, I have to admit that I have never played the original Resident Evil 3. In fact, my true confession may out me as a fake fan, but it's the truth. My first foray into the series lies in the sweet, sultry arms of Resident
Evil 4.
While I may not be as die-hard or impassioned of a fan as many others, I have watched from the shadows a pained wrinkle upon my brow and a quiver in my Wimbledons as the series cascaded into parody. So with a return to form in Resident Evil 7, as well as the RE2 remake proving it wasn't a fucking fluke, Resident Evil 3's approach to action brought back some post-traumatic gamer stress. And it isn't that an action-oriented Resident Evil can't work, it's that the action in the series' DNA has been wildly inconsistent, leaning more towards sloppy. It works well when it progresses to its apex near the end of a game. But when Capcom attempts to imbue the entire runtime of its Resident Evil games with action, well, Resident Evil 4 aside, it comes off as an introvert trying to force themselves to become an extrovert, an affliction that has affected its sister series, Silent Hill. Why has this happened? Why, when balletic action and hyper-stylized set pieces were far from Resident Evil's conceived origins, does this series and others like it attempt to gear more toward those ingredients? Well, unlike Silent Goddamn Hill, there is a legitimate answer. One that I believe true and casual fans alike overlook.
Now here's a weird fucking door. Leave it.
Resident Evil began its life with two of its most definitive features, static camera angles and its very of-the-time tank controls. Of course, with the 2005 release of Resident Evil 4, it would reinvent its image once again with the revolutionary over-the-shoulder shooter perspective. Both eras of the game's style would turn out to revolutionize the gaming industry entirely, with imitations of gameplay and style releasing to various degrees of success. Capcom has essentially influenced not only the survival horror genre, but the entire video game medium for nearly the entire lifespan of modern 3D platforms. However, one would be remiss to believe that Resident Evil itself has been royalty ever since. In fact, the catalyst for the series' continued knack for reinvention was often their close brushes with liquidation. By the time Resident Evil 4 had kicked into production, it was a race to save the series not only from irrelevance, but likely termination of the entire IP by Capcom. Resident Evil 7 in turn reinvented the series over a decade later, primarily to return to its roots and salvage their relationship with an audience that was slowly souring on them once again. And herein lies the secret power of the Resident Evil franchise, one that not only everyone should behold, but one that everyone should treasure as a true mark of creativity. Resident Evil is a saga of transformation, continuously bobbing and weaving through cultural rifts to thrive in different forms and fashions. The popular trends of the times ebb and flow. Slow motion clearly isn't as cool now as it was at the turn of the millennium. Resident Evil 7 has found its way to surf with a tide of popularity at a legendary level. Sure, it's had its moments of repetitiveness and played-out tropes, but if you pay attention to its rhythm, those dull periods have actually been the times when they were figuring out how to evolve. After all, the limping shell of Resident Evil 6 paved the way for the masterful Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil is a beast made from many ingredients, but its most timeless and powerful characteristic is most in common with a zombie-producing virus: its ability to adapt, evolve, and survive. We return then to Resident Evil 3. Much like its 1999 namesake, both versions have aimed to expand upon what the series is capable of. But where the 2020 remake is more important is that it is also a celebration of Resident Evil and our love for gaming as a whole. Capcom pulled out all the stops to deliver a game that they really didn't need to give us, especially with their successful path forward with Resident Evil 7 and the upcoming Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil 3 Remake, even Resident Evil 2 Remake, were at their core love letters to an audience that has stuck by the series since 1997. And in a world where companies and creators often employ the laziest methods to produce shallow content, Capcom could be called many things, but lazy and uncaring of its audience, it cannot. Resident Evil 3 is flawed, but I believe at its core it was a beautiful gift to take us back into the world of Resident Evil, if only for a few short hours. And I believe that when you look past its shortcomings, or what it could have been, we might see that the game was a gift to us that we didn't need, but it was a miracle that we got it.